This story follows a strange but bright 4-year-old boy named Kotaro Sato, who tries to navigate life on his own after facing neglect and abuse. I know what you are thinking, how can a 4-year-old even live on his own? But Kotaro has the emotional intelligence of Mr. Miyagi. Also, he talks like and has the mannerisms of an ancient feudal lord since his role model is a samurai character named Tanasaman from his favorite cartoon that is about to end. Kotaro first moves into the Shimizu apartments, and the owners of the building don't seem to care that he is a child, as long as he pays for the space on time every month as everyone else does. He then quickly befriends the other tenants. A young woman named Mizuki Akatomo, the rather eccentric Asimo, and most importantly, his next-door neighbor, Shin Karino, a struggling manga artist. Kotaro gives all his new neighbors tissues as gifts. Weird, right? We will find out later why. Karino is very suspicious as to how his neighbor is only for living on his own. Nonetheless, Karino quickly grows a liking for Kotaro. In the beginning, Karino and Kotaro go to the grocery store, and the other shoppers comment that Karino and Kotaro look so much alike, suggesting they are father and son. The comments were rolling so much that Karino himself was slightly worried that he might actually be Kotaro's dad. He starts thinking about the woman he was seeing 4 years prior and repeatedly asks Kotaro if he knows who his parents are. Kotaro makes it very well known that Karino looks nothing like his dad and that it would be a ridiculous mistake to think so. Kotaro also mentions that he believes Karino is either a servant or an extremely worried adult treating him like he is a child as if he isn't one. Because of Kotaro's suffering, he no longer views himself as a child. He does everything on his own and never asks for help from others because he does not want to burden them. It's crazy to think that a 4-year-old child would feel like they are a burden to other people. He also rarely shows emotions because he thinks it's a sign of weakness. So how exactly is a 4-year-old able to pay for an apartment and groceries? We learn early on that Kotaro's mother passed away. Now her life insurance assigns Kotaro a lawyer to give him his allowance. Although the reason is unknown, the lawyer is not allowed to disclose where the money comes from. Ayano Kobayashi takes over her predecessor and pays Kotaro a weekly visit to give him his allowance. Since Kotaro will never meet his benefactor, he packages 7 days' worth of journal entries and a candy bar to give to his lawyer with the hopes of the lawyer giving it to his donor. Although the story surrounding the abuse and abandonment of his parents is not well understood yet, we know that he still loves his family greatly. Because of that, he acts a certain way in hopes that his family will love him and embrace him again because he believes that his actions are what drove his family away from him. Truly, he just wants his family. Kotaro tricks a man handing out balloons into giving him 4 instead of just 1. We aren't really sure why he needed so many balloons. After getting the balloons, he visits Karino to ask him to draw faces on the balloons, and then Kotaro labels the balloons mom, dad, brother, and sister. After Kotaro goes to the playground alone, he attaches the balloons to his waist and starts playing around them. Was one of the saddest scenes throughout the show. The man selling balloons eventually discovers the deception, but when he sees what Kotaro did to the balloons, he quietly leaves him alone and even hopes that Kotaro of the balloons will last a long time. Fortunately, Kotaro befriends a classmate Kakeru, who, unlike Kotaro, lives in a 2-parent household and also has a maid named Yoshida. Yoshida does everything for Kakeru, from getting his juice to organizing his shoes to charging his game controller. So Kotaro took it upon himself to teach Kakeru how to fish, so he knows how to fend for himself. Kotaro explains to him that children are inherently weak and need to know how to do things on their own in case there are no adults around. The two decide to go back to Kotaro's place to clean the crawfish and cook them to make some miso soup. However, Kakeru can't help but notice the unsettling quietness of Kotaro's home. Kakeru can only imagine how lonely Kotaro must be and offers to go fishing with him again whenever he feels lonely. Kotaro's eyes immediately light up in gratitude, and he says he is forever indebted to Kakeru for his kindness. Back at Shimizu School, Kotaro ends up on the receiving end of this trope during a game of dodgeball at this school. He was covered in bruises and band-aids because he refused to dodge the ball. He was also not skilled enough athletically to catch it, so he was repeatedly hit all over his body. He also would politely roll the ball back to the other side. He clearly did not understand the game of dodgeball. Kotaro says that to dodge a ball from a friend entirely ignores that friend, which is unacceptable. He only feels this way because, growing up, his mother often ignored him when he sought attention. As a result, Kotaro requests that Karino help him train rigorously until he is no longer a failure. Karino quickly understands that Kotaro is severely damaged and will do anything to help him out. All of the tenants at the Shimizu apartments rally together to protect Kotaro. Later Kotaro admits his birthday is coming up, but his neighbors are shocked to learn the boy had no idea birthdays are a reason for celebration. Kotaro says that it did not occur to him that him being born was a good thing. His neighbors are saddened by his response. But after learning of its importance, Kotaro takes his birthday very seriously. He even starts praying for his lung capacity for the moment he has to blow out all of the candles on his birthday cake. His neighbors decide to surprise him with a cake, but to their surprise, Kotaro has already gotten to it first and decided to borrow the cake to share with his friends. His friends are the 3 neighborhood cats who he assumes has also never celebrated their birthday, so it was only right that their birthday is celebrated too. Later, Kakeru shares that he is tired of living at home and want the independence that Kotaro has, and asks him to join him in the running away. They don't get too far since Kakeru is afraid actually to leave his neighborhood and ends up staying at Kotaro's place instead, and changes his mind completely when he learns Kotaro is living all alone. Kakeru finally realizes how fortunate he is to have people around him that love him and are willing to take care of him. Kotaro's classmates make remarks that his tissues were plain and lacked cartoon decorations after offering one to a sick classmate. He's puzzled at their remarks but nonetheless pays a visit to his local grocery store with Karino to pick up the silky yet pricey tissues he requested for the week prior. Karino is confused about why Kotaro cares so much about the ingredients in the tissues and why he is willing to pay so much for them. On their way back home, Kotaro even mentions that the tissues are rather sweet. Karino did not understand why it mattered why a 4-year-old, let alone anyone, would care if the tissue was sweet until is he watching television at home. On his local news station, a man was being interviewed and mentioned that he would eat tissues when he was all alone to prevent himself from starving, and to his surprise, the tissues were sweet. It was not until then that Karino was able to piece together why Kotaro cared so much about the ingredients in the tissues he bought. Kotaro was eating tissues to stay alive. The next day Karino takes Kotaro back to the grocery store and tells him to buy the cheaper tissues because he is no longer alone and does not need to eat tissues anymore. It is there where Kotaro actually felt he was no longer alone. Later in the day, Kobayashi visits Kotaro to give him his weekly allowance, but this time Kotaro gives her 8 journal entries instead of 7. The 8th journal entry says, "I will do my best to bring joy." We can only imagine that he thinks the generous donor is his mom and is reminding her that he is doing everything in his power to be the best son. The following day, a man named Aota moves into the Shimizu apartments and pays Kotaro a visit to introduce himself. He mentions that he will be staying in room 103 and will only be here for a month on a business trip. Aota also weirdly wants to be Kotaro's friend because he is so lonely and hates being alone on business trips. Since Kotaro is a very neighborly person, he tells Karino that he will no longer need his assistance to the bathhouse or school drop-offs and pickups. Sir Aota will be accompanying him for the month. Karino makes a face, and Kotaro adds that he needs not be jealous. Karino tries to disguise his jealousy, but it is clear as day that he is jealous that Kotaro will be spending much less time with him. Aota and Kotaro grow quite fond of each other in such a short time, which grows a lot of suspicion among Karino and Tamu. Especially since he's been asking many questions about Kotaro's whereabouts and family. So Karino and Tamu do what they think is best and decide to ambush Aota at his apartment. In an attempt to pay him off for the real reason, he is here. When money is presented, Aota is not reluctant to tell them that Kotaro's dad hired him to investigate Kotaro's location. Kotaro walks in on the commotion and asks that Karino and Tamu leave his friend Aota alone. To our disbelief, we are again reminded that Kotaro is wise beyond his years. Later that night, Aota visits Kotaro and tells him that he would love to remain friends, even after he leaves. To Aota's surprise, Kotaro immediately asks him, "Are you going to tell my dad where I live?" The scene ends there, but we late find out that Aota sympathizes with the boy and gives Kaduro's father a fake address. This is where we learn that Kotaro fled his orphanage because his father was looking for him. And that is what brought him to the Shimizu apartment. In a flashback, it is revealed that Kotaro's mom told him that she would be leaving for a while and that it would just be his father with him. She alludes that she would come back to him but does not say where she is going or when she will come back. After Kobayashi reads Kotaro's journal entry about missing his childhood home, she decides to take it upon herself to take Kotaro to the apartment. She was reluctant that it might bring more painful memories than good ones, but she took him anyway. Kotaro seemed still through most of the experience, but he just wanted to know that place he once called home was still flourishing. Kotaro looks one last time outside the apartment at his previous home, and two ladies walk by, chatting about the child who once lived there. That child is Kotaro. We learned that Kotaro was taken by Child Protective Services when both his parents did not come back home for months and abandoned him. For some reason, Kotaro refuses to believe he was abandoned. In the upcoming days, Karino and a new neighbor Takei realize that Kotaro is putting on a lot of weight, and I mean a ton of it. He's literally shaped like a balloon, so Karino and Takei decide to attend a PTA meeting about the school's nutrition. They suspect that the food at school may cause his weight gain. However, when both Karino and Takei saw the proportion of one plate of food, they immediately knew that wasn't the culprit. It wasn't until Takei noticed that Kotaro's classmates were giving him his leftovers. Takei sat with Kotaro and asked him why he was eating the other classmates' leftovers if he was no longer hungry. He said that the next meal is never guaranteed, so I must eat what is in front of me. Takei's eyes watered with sadness because this was her first encounter with the abuse Kotaro had to go through with his parents. Shortly after, Kotaro is visited by a young man named Tasuku, who used to live in the orphanage with him, and whom Kotaro idolizes. He quickly charms the boy again and gets Kotaro to supposedly give him huge sums of money from his weekly allowance so they can buy a house together. Ayano Kobayashi gets very suspicious, so she decides to run a background check on Tasuku. To her disbelief, she finds out that Tasuku has an insurmountable amount of debt to multiple people and is actually using Kotaro's money to pay them off. Karino and Ayano both confront Tasuku and try to tell Kotaro the truth, but ultimately, Kotaro reveals he knew all along his friend was deceiving him but wanted to give him a chance to do the right thing. Kotaro's belief in him ultimately makes Tasuku do a heel-phase turn and find a job as a construction worker so he can pay back Kotaro the money he got from him. The struggling manga artist Karino finally gets a break and potentially may have a chance to turn one of his stories into a series. He struggles to balance the workload of finishing his story and caring for Kotaro. Fortunately for Karino, his ex-girlfriend pays a surprise visit and decides to relieve some of the work of caring for Kotaro so that he can finish his manga. However, Kotaro does ask Karino if he would accompany him to the Konomi station. Kotaro says they need to leave on the morrow, and it upsets him that Karino is not ready on time the next day. We understand that he has been sleeping later than usual, trying to make his deadline, so most people would understand that he may need the extra time to get situated. However, Kotaro sees most things in black and white, and there is no gray area. Kotaro says that Karino is a liar for not being ready, but Karino insists that lying is not even his cup of tea and that he has never lied before. So why would he start now? Fast forward, Kotaro and Karino are on the train to Konomi Station, and Kotaro lets Karino know that the first stop would be a flower shop. The flower shop is not a usual location for the pair. So immediately, Karino questions it but, needless to say, allows Kotaro to do what he wants while he supports him. The final destination of their journey was a cemetery, and Kotaro recalls that his mother brought him there one time. The tombstone read when Mia's family grave, and Kotaro wanted to pay his respects to his mother's parents since it's been a long time since he had last visited. However, he never actually had the pleasure of meeting them since they passed before he was even born. As they were washing off the tombstones, it is revealed that Kotaro's mom, Saori Mia, is also buried there. Immediately, Karino stands in front of the site of the tombstone that reveals his mom's name, so Kotaro would not see. After repeatedly asking Karino to move, he doesn't and decides to pay his respects to his grandparents anyways. He then asks Karino if he thinks he will ever see his mom again. Karino cannot fathom hurting him, so he decides to lie even if Kotaro decides to hate him later. Karino lies to Kotaro and says, "Of course." Kotaro promptly says, "Karino, you are a man of your word, so I should believe it is true, for I know you would never lie to me." On their way home, Karino asks Colorado to promise to always invite him to the graveyard whenever he goes. One to prevent Kotaro from seeing that his mom has passed away, and the second to tell her all the amazing stories about her son Kotaro. It ends with Kotaro and all his neighbors meeting in front of the apartment and appointing Karino as his loyal subject since it's the truest honor. The ending begs the question, though, if Kotaro is, in fact, aware that his mother has passed away and Karina was lying. It would not be surprising since Kotaro was always a few steps ahead of everyone, even when he was being deceived.